Hello, I'm Miranda, and today I'm going to be reviewing White Dwarf issue number 489. So this is the first of my actual subscription to White Dwarf, so you'll notice the cover does look slightly different. It's a cleaner cover, I think a more artistic, it just focuses on the artwork if you're subscribed to the magazine. But other than that, the content is completely identical to whatever you would pick up in the store if you are not subscribed to White Dwarf. So for this issue, it starts off being more based on Age of Sigmar to actually start with. Of course, the managing editor for the magazine is Lyle Lowry. Hi, Lyle. So White Dwarf Magazine actually always starts off with, letters from people who write in or people who are showing off their miniatures. And there's a really cool story in here that obviously the editors at White Dwarf liked, where a friend wanted his other friend to join a heresy campaign. And the friend wanted to join, but he didn't have an army to paint or painted or to play with. And his friend coordinated with both his own wife and his friend's wife, so, very kind wives there, to purchase and paint up 2 3,000 point armies for him and his friend to participate in this campaign. So all I can say is, whew, that is some true friendship right there. The next article in here is actually really useful. Callum Davis gives us a pronunciation guide for several of the characters inside of the Worlds of Warhammer. So, just to provide a few examples, pronunciation for Nocturne, Nakmund, Ball, kind of easy ones. Those are different locations. They give you the World Eaters, so how to pronounce Karn and Angron. Maybe some of the more difficult ones like Kalgoroth and Skalathrax. So I appreciate them doing that, and they've put out some videos online too with pronunciation guides to various characters in the world. So I appreciate that. Okay, so jumping over into, like I said, the first half of the magazine is very much Age of Sigmar based. So they're jumping into the Flashpoint, which are these segments of stories that are told throughout multiple magazines. This is Flashpoint Rondel, which is a continuation and seems like a big finale battle between like orcs destruction sort of stuff versus like Sigmarites. They're trying to protect the city of Everquake. So Everquake City, as you might imagine, is built on a fault line, and there's these magical pylons underground underneath the city that absorb the tectonic shocks to keep the city from falling apart. And so it's sort of magically held together. Well, this very brilliant orc by the name of Gruck Deathskull decides that he's going to go after those pylons and smashy them, and that's part of a two-prong attack where these Gargants, which are just the giants of Age of Sigmar, will be able to break through the walls of the city and get to, well, the edible folks inside, let's say. So it ends up being a really exciting battle. It's filled with not one battle report, but two. There is a Warcry battle report and Warcry game that you can play that covers going underground and just completing the destroy the pylons or protect the pylons setup. And then the results of that affected the overall main game on the surface, which didn't go so well for the Sigmarites, unfortunately. But like I said, the battle is really cool. Now, one of the things that I thought was actually really neat, and it kind of speaks to some of the feedback, or at least some of the comments that I saw from the last review, that, for people who read White Dwarf back in, the 90s or, just way back when, it had a lot more articles about building terrain or building stuff to help play your game. So in this issue, I was really excited to share that they actually have a guide for building your own walls to the city, gates, and stairs. They take 25mm XPVC, like those sheets of extruded polystyrene, I believe, And a lot of that stuff is easy enough to just mark on with a pen, but you can go over it with a craft knife. You know, they give you the basic disclaimers like don't cut yourself, don't burn yourself, don't breathe in toxic fumes, you know, things that generally good advice. I thought the crafting of the walls, especially the gate, worked really well. I mean, they did a beautiful job, and it was actually like this massive 5-part gate that gets destroyed or can be destroyed because the attacker, it's an attacker-defender scenario, and the attacker can break through the walls because they have hitboxes essentially, or wounds, and when you get past that, then that's the city being breached, and I don't know, it just feels like a real war game, right? It's like, it's cool. For those of you into Warcry, there is a small article in here on the Soulblight Grave Lords. So vampire faction, if you're interested in building out a Warcry band with them and naming them and figuring out their backstory, this is the article that will show you how to do that. All right, and that's about half of the magazine there. And then we actually jump into the proper 40K stuff. And I'm just gonna interrupt here real quick just to ask that if you are enjoying this content, please be sure to hit the like button, leave me a comment if there's a specific article or thought you have on this video. I love to get your feedback on it and know what you think of this. All right, back to the review. To start off, it has the Tale of 4 Warlords. So this looks like this is an ongoing series, presumably done once per year. Sort of a year-long approximate challenge where 4 warlords are picked. They seem to all be folks who work for GW. However, the audience is encouraged to join in with it. It's a hobbying competition, so you gain points for painting so many models, playing so many games, playing specifically with your warlords for so many games, winning the games. So it's points for participating in each aspect of the hobby. Maybe not the reading part. It doesn't seem to include finish 3 Black Library books or anything like that. So the challenge for that starts in June, and it looks like it ends as of next April. So the goal is to see how much hobbying you can get assembled, painted, and played with by that point. So it's sort of to help encourage people to try either new things or get off their butt and paint their stuff they have, or maybe you and your friends can have a small competition that follows along with what they're doing. It's that whole community thing that, this is what it's all about. Okay, then we have a new article on the Arcs of Omen. So an update in the Arcs of Omen Herald of Misery series. We're following Zagra, who has claimed a special key fragment after a very epic battle from the last issue that had a battle report with it, and he's kind of won. He's doing a victory lap. He's just wreaking havoc. Funny enough, there's all the story of just him doing his thing because he's working for Abaddon, but he's on the Arcs of Omen big ol' Space Hulk craft, which is just so enormous that there are orcs that had invaded at one point, and they just sort of sealed them off in part of the ship to deal with them later. So Zagra decides that, now that he's, high-fiving, he's gotten what he wants, he's going to go after those orcs and, clean them out once and for all, which doesn't go quite as well as he would have hoped. In the meantime, while they've been just in whatever section of the Space Hulk, locked away, they've been dismantling parts of the ship to make mech boys. They've, let their psychic energy grow. There's so many more of them. Their fungal spores are all over the ship. And the Arcs of Omen is a bit of a cursed Space Hulk, and it seems to have a lot of ties to the warp. So during this enormous bloody battle between Zagra's men and the orcs, it sort of invites warp energies that start creating other sentient fungal things to infect parts of the ship. So now there's these fungal tendrils as part of the ship that just attack people now, which means new rules for reboarding actions. So they are called corrupted bulkheads, and more specifically, technofungal legions, which, doesn't that sound appetizing? And a mechanotendral lair. So these are different tiles that you can attack. The magazine includes example tiles that you can copy out and use for your game as well. So, and plus another scenario that you can play with involving fungal legions. Yay! All right, then we jump over to a new Echoes from the Warp article by Duncan War, which hopefully I'm pronouncing correctly now, but still, really GW. And he talks about kind of the design, more of the design behind tile placement for boarding actions. And it's interesting because so much of it comes from a design point of how do we make this fun? How do we give players agency? How do we make sure that you're not experiencing as a player too many of those feels bad moments, where you place objectives, making sure those are in places that you don't have to go so far out of the battle to deal with. You want to make sure that your objectives are in places that people can engage with, but maybe have to make decisions whether they're engaging an enemy or engaging that objective, dealing with corridors and such, and keeping in mind whether or not your players are running around on 25mm bases or 60mm bases. So it's a really interesting article if you are looking at it from designing your boarding actions and laying out those maps to help design them in the most fun way. And the faction spotlight in this issue is on the Dark Angels. So last issue, Lionel Johnson had come back, his data slate was in that magazine, and now we're doing a faction focus on the Dark Angels. So it talks about a tiny bit about their background, a lot more information on building your own sub-chapter, how you would name them, what you would base their history on, and then a slew of absolutely gorgeously painted models. Now I'm used to looking at Dark Angels and thinking dark green, black, some white. I didn't even realize this really cool bone color that they also have as an alternative scheme that just looks beautiful on them. So there's some really cool examples of how else you can paint your Dark Angels in here. Oh, this green dark tile in here, mwah. Now, this is actually a showpiece model. The guy painting it even says he's not really playing with it. Why? Because he put lights on it. And what do those look like? Oh, well, they made the back of the cover show that. It's so cool. So kudos to you, Ken Fung. You did an amazing job with that. There is also a new narrative mission for Kill Team. You get to follow a couple of assassins, which culminate into actually a 3-player kill team match in which you play 2 teams that are competing to catch a psyker who's a prisoner who has thralls at their disposal. So there's a 3-player game, and supposedly it's kind of designed to help introduce players to Kill Team by having, I think, the more experienced person be the prisoner and being able to participate in the game while teaching. There's a little backstory that follows the characters that lead up to this battle as well. They always do a little lead up and then they go, okay, and here's the game. So you kind of have an idea of the narrative that you are playing with it. Now, you don't always have to play specifically that way. You can adapt it easy enough for your own models, but it always gives you sort of a place to start. There is a short little article in here too for the Horus Heresy fans out there. A cool little blurb on the Vindicator tanks of the Horus Heresy era, and then there are a few battle doctrines. There's 3 battle doctrines that this magazine includes as well. And finally, the part that I've kind of found myself most excited to get to, this is part 5 of the ongoing Grombrindle series. This is No God's Land. I'm super excited because I really enjoy reading these end story articles, and I know it all takes place in the Age of Sigmar, which honestly is a lore that I'm not all that familiar with, so this has kind of been an introduction of it for me. And every time I read these specific little serials, it makes me totally imagine a Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings style RPG, like old school RPG when things were serious, and I am loving every minute of it. So that has been super fun to read through, and I don't want to spoil any of it for those of you who might be curious about the story, but I have found it to be escalating to quite the exciting story. more beautifully painted models from the studios, more custom built customization of models that look really, really beautiful. All right, and that is the whole magazine for this issue of White Dwarf, June 2023. Did you have a favorite article in here? Which one was your favorite? Make sure to let me know in the comments. I do like to look at them and read them and know whether or not I'm pronouncing names right or what your thoughts are. I love hearing stories about people who've subscribed to White Dwarf from way back when, because the magazine's been around for so long. And yeah, hopefully we will see you next time. Have a great one.